Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Thanks very much for coming back to Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream, sponsored by Trailtopia. We're on to episode number 7, and this one is called Setting Records. Nope, Bruce is not going for the fastest known time. I think that when you get to your 60s, you recognise the fact that you were not a man built for speed, and I think Bruce and I both know that about ourselves. We talk about a few records from others, and the impact that some of these people may have had on the trail. The conversation gets back to Bruce's own hike and his own attempt upon a record. That record being the conflation of his hike into something more than himself and donating a record sum to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. But before we get on to Bruce and me, there's this. Do you remember those days on the trail when you really need to treat yourself? You know, those days when you fall in the mud or the rain starts running down your neck, the rocks are driving you crazy, or even when you're just fed up. You need a boost, and when that happens, stop hiking, take off your pack, and treat yourself to one of Trailtopia's scrumptious desserts. Why not go for Rocky Road pudding? A rich chocolate pudding loaded with mini marshmallows and toasted slivered almonds. By the time you get that into your system, you'll be warm, toasty, and satisfied. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. And we're back. Oh, well, I remember, I'll be having a short chat with Vince Robichaud, the owner of Trailtopia, on my other podcast, Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, this coming Wednesday. Several of you have written to me for more information about the company, and I know that you're going to be impressed by Vince's backpacking and cooking background. Just before we get into our chat, I wanted to tell you something. This episode is being released on December the 18th, and last Monday, the 11th, Bruce and I met up for a round of golf. He was down my way visiting his father. Now, I've met Bruce before and found him to be a genial, friendly guy. Yet the Bruce I met last Monday was really in his own environment. We were on a golf course, and he knows how to play. Having interviewed him over the past 2 months, I've noticed him loosening up a little more each week. But my first reaction after spending 5 minutes with him last Monday was, where on earth has this bloke been? We spent the entire round chatting, laughing, and generally joshing each other. When I thought about it later, I realised where he's been. Bruce is a powerful lawyer. He's comfortable in this, and I think I've discovered that despite his preparations, despite his outward confidence in his hike, Bruce has a natural nervousness of not only the hike but also the podcast. And why wouldn't he? Bruce is all about testing himself and stepping into the unknown. When I first talked to him about doing this podcast, he was immediately enthusiastic. He was the one who found our sponsor. He was the one who put together our agenda for the shows. The two of us wanted to tell all aspects of his story, and I think that we are. I also think that Bruce is being tested in this podcast in an unnatural environment for him. He's also going to be tested as he hits the trail. His enthusiasm for both is growing, and I think that his willingness to put himself forward for both should be inspirational for those of us who don't step up to get involved in life. Now, let's hear from Bruce with his start date getting closer and closer. Okay, we're back on with Bruce again. Good morning, Bruce. How are you?
Good morning, Steve. I'm doing great, thanks.
Good. And this show is called Setting Records, and it's all about records and goals and kind of linking them to your hike. Now, we've all heard of the various fastest known time records, and you're a bit of an AT, well, you would call it historian, I'd call it nerd, because you study this stuff quite strongly. So I presume you've been following this subject. Do you think the publicity that these records have been getting is good for the AT?
Interesting question. Is it good for the AT? You know, I think it probably is good for the AT and good for people generally to be exposed to the fact that the AT is there, that there's this great footpath that goes up and down the East Coast.
Yeah.
And it's good for people to know about it. I know there's some concern about the celebrations that have occurred at the top of Katahdin, and Baxter State Park has tried to regulate that a little bit more. But it seems to me that's a pretty small situation. So very narrow time that there will be a few of those situations. And I think the publicity will reduce the future celebrations that the park finds, inappropriate. But it's always good for people to be inspired to get outdoors. It's always good for people to understand that there's this footpath, and even if they're not going to try to set a record or do a through hike, that there's this great path that's, if they're on the East Coast, relatively close to where they live. And it's great to get them to think about getting out and hiking for a day or hiking for a weekend. And I think it's just great to get people outdoors. I think it's great to get people hiking and walking. And I think sometimes these extraordinary events bring attention to things, and it's hard to see that being terribly negative. I'm sure there's people out there who will criticize the speedsters, as you might call them, because they're running through the woods. They're not smelling the roses.
Yes.
But you know what? That's a great endurance activity that some remarkable individuals have a chance to do.
Yeah.
I think walking the entire through hike is a great endurance activity, and I hope
So
I can accomplish it.
Yeah. The thought of running it in less than 50 days is just crazy to me.
Exactly.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah. It's the times have gotten ridiculous, and there has been, as you indicated, there's been a lot of attention the last few years with respect to setting records on the AT and getting more and more attention drawn to the AT.
Yeah.
And maybe there's too many people, trying to do through hikes, and maybe I'm one of them. The numbers are certainly going up, and my guess is that some of the coverage of the Scott Jureks and the Jennifer Farr Davises and all the others might be inspiring some people to get out there and walk, which is good. Maybe getting them out there trying to do a through hike may not necessarily be good. We haven't really spoken about this, but the numbers are getting pretty high.
Oh, yeah.
The number of people doing a through hike, particularly going northbound. We mentioned one reason I'm leaving early is to get a little bit ahead of that crowd.
Yeah.
And you can actually, and I guess you're right about being an AT nerd and a bit of a historian. I've been reading about these things for a while now, and the percentage of hikers that are finishing looks like it's dropping back a little bit. It was increasing for years.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I thought it was about 25% pretty consistently. Didn't it used to be?
Yeah. It was pretty consistent around there, and then it inched up into the higher 20s. And a lot of people attributed more lightweight gear, the more use of telecommunications, easier resupply of increasing those numbers, because no one knows for sure why those numbers increase.
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. Certainly the lightweight gear makes, this, particularly the ultralight stuff, makes this really more and more accessible every day. I've been speaking with people who are talking about 40, 50, 60 pound packs, 80 pound packs in the past. And can you just imagine carrying an 80 pound pack for 2,000 miles? Yet some people get by with less than 20 pounds. So that's very accessible,
it's
isn't
amazing.
it?
Yeah. Well, we talked about that last week about how some of the super ultralighters are getting base weights under 15 pounds. I can't imagine it. But that's got to make it easier for some people.
Yeah.
But there appears to be, in the recent years, maybe a little fallback in the percentage of people completing. And some of the speculation has been that there are too many people out there who don't understand what they're getting into. So people may be rushing out there because there was a movie, Walk in the Woods or Wild, or there's more attention to the trail because of some of these records. And maybe there are a few more people out there trying to do something they don't understand, and that's causing these numbers maybe to fall back. But I think, for the most part, still 1 in 4 people will probably succeed this coming year.
It's worth thinking about because it becomes, and hopefully we're making it, or it's becoming more accessible to people. People think they can do it almost without thinking about it. And I think Newfound Gap sorts a few people out. A lot of people get off the trail around not Newfound Gap, mountain crossings. People get off the trail after that 25, 30 miles because it isn't for them. And so you don't want people going into it unprepared totally, but learning along the way and being inspired by people. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. Scott Jurek was massively inspirational to everybody, I think, on the trail. And then this young guy this year, String Bean, as well. What did you think about those efforts?
Same thing. First of all, I admire people who go out and set a goal and try to conquer it. And this is an amazing goal. I have no idea how someone can cover Georgia to Maine, averaging 50 miles a day. It is staggering. And what's so staggering this year about String Bean's effort is that he set both the supported and the unsupported record at the same time.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Extraordinary.
It's really, really hard to believe these physical accomplishments, but to me they're inspirational. To me, they don't really detract from the trail. I don't think many people get the impression that the trail's out there just for people who want to do those things. And
absolutely.
I like the fact that more and more people will be exposed to what the Appalachian Trail is. I don't think that's a bad thing, because we want people out there hiking for half a day, a weekend, a week, or whatever it might be. So but the attention to record, I have been following this, and Jennifer Farr Davis set the record in 2011, and then Matt Kirk did, and then Scott Jurek did, and a year after Scott Jurek did it, Carl Meltzer did it, and the year after Carl did it, String Bean did it. So you almost have to ask who's going to do it next year. One thing we know is it won't be me.
Well, I was that's a really good segue, because I want to bring you back to reality now. It's going to be more than 46 days. Have you thought about how long it's going to take you to reach Katahdin?
Yes. Yeah, as you can imagine. So it's a great combination we have between you and me, someone who has planned for 3 or 4 years, and you who have admittedly did very little. So I think it's a great back and forth of our experiences. But I have, and you have to make sure I finish this answer, because I literally have mapped out every day from start to finish. And
that's hilarious. All I can say to you, hang on. All I can say to you, Bruce, is Mike Tyson. But carry on.
That's exactly right. And I don't believe for a minute that I will actually meet that schedule, and probably won't meet it much at all. But two things about scheduling it out. One is it was so much fun, because as I'm scheduling it out, I'm dreaming about actually doing it. And I'm sure having this excitement, thinking about, hey, I didn't realize that after I do this, I'm going to have this great experience, in this historic town or whatever it might be. And we talked earlier about the rhythm of the trail, and I think my experience will be enhanced by appreciating the rhythm, appreciating, what comes next, and some of the you might say the yin and yang of the trail, and knowing those things, I think will actually improve the experience. I really had this epiphany when I was planning after I did the Camino, because I did the Camino and I didn't do much planning, quite frankly. Life was busy, and I didn't do any of the type of planning I've been doing for the Appalachian Trail.
By the way, your version of no planning is probably 10 times as much as mine, but okay.
Probably. But I learned, because you do meet so many people on the Camino like you do on the trail, that there's this one town called Grañón. I'm sure that's terrible Spanish, but that, and there's lots of iconic places along the Camino, just like there are on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
And I learned later in the Camino that there was this one particular hostel in Grañón that has a very historic experience. And a number of people I met said, hey, did you stay at such and such in Grañón? And I missed this iconic experience on the trail that many people found very profound on their trip.
Right.
So if you take that experience and say, I want to get the most I can out of this experience, understanding where those iconic experiences are, understanding where 0.3 mile Blue Blaze trail might take you to an extraordinary waterfall or view is worth the planning, I think. So that, if I'm going to be out there for a number of months, what's an extra 30 minutes if it takes in a really special experience along the trail?
I totally agree with that. And interestingly enough, it's something that's definitely came out of my hike, was taking those views when you can, because sometimes you just, the cloud may be there, you may not see anything. You're going to go past that iconic view, as you say, and you may be able to, you may see nothing. So if there's a chance and you've got a beautiful day, you should be taking all the views you possibly can.
I couldn't agree more. One of the great things I did, and it was just sort of talk about spontaneous. I was at one of those iconic places on the Camino, and I waited and waited for the clouds to lift and clear, and they just didn't, and they never did. And I waited, and I finally moved on. And about 30 minutes later, as I was coming down this hill, this mountain scene opened up, and it was still very fogged in and clouded in.
Yeah.
And something about it, I said, I've been out hiking enough, and I've watched weather patterns enough. I said, it's going to clear. And I literally plopped down on the side of the trail with this magnificent cloudy view in front of me. And for the next 60 minutes, I watched the clouds lift, and I had this magnificent scene.
How awesome.
And some of the photography I got from that was incredible.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because a lot of people walked by me who I knew. I was 5 minutes or 10 minutes ahead of them for the day on the trail, and they said hello and whatever. I decided to have my lunch, and these two women I had hiked with a couple of days came by, and they said, "This is a great idea." And they sat down with me, pulled out their lunch, and if I could show you the scenes, it was just magnificent. And
that's awesome.
To me, I want to take the time to not miss those experiences, because if you think about it, since I'm not trying to do this in 46 days, what's an extra half a day or a few hours to really take in those opportunities? Absolutely.
So do you, despite taking those opportunities, as I absolutely agree you should do you actually have a projected finish date right now?
So when I mapped this all out, I tried to be reasonable. I tried to use the first 2, 3, 4 weeks at sort of a 10 mile a day, maybe 10 to 12, depending on the day and the terrain. Then I tried to increase it, and I tried to average around 15 miles a day. And I baked in 1 0 day every 10 days.
Right.
And if I was able to do all of that, I would summit on my birthday on July 15th.
Oh, cool.
I doubt that's going to happen. But that's 4.5 months. I think that's a little on the fast side, but it's at least with pen and paper, it's not a crazy objective. Now, I think I've been telling everyone 5 months. And, when Cheryl and I talk about it, the one thing, I think she's emphasizing my good health, not rushing, not hurting myself.
Absolutely.
And the beauty is that if I need 6 months, I can take 6 months.
Well, that was going to be the question. You're going to hike until you get there. It'd be nice to get there on your birthday, but if it means you're getting there a month and a half later, that doesn't really matter either. You've got the time to do it, haven't you?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. I have this prospect of Cheryl and Brooke and Amy actually coming up to Maine and doing Katahdin with me. And the biggest thing is, to get that done with everyone's schedules, we do need to get up to Katahdin before Labor Day. So a little bit of pressure and expectation, but we're not going to ruin the hike or hurt myself just to meet that. So it's very hard, as you can imagine, today, wondering how my progress will go, what problems I'll run into, what minor injuries I might have, hopefully no major injuries. So it's really hard to project, but I've actually done that. And a lot of, as I said, part of my projecting was fun. The other part of projecting was just thinking through, okay, in this part of the trail, whether I reach it on this day or that day, I do need 5 days of supply. And during this part of the trail, I can get off and do that. And it just reminds you of different opportunities or needs, and that helps, I think, ultimately with my planning. So there's an excitement of vicariously hiking the trail, or not vicariously, but at least dreaming about it while you're planning. And then there is a practical planning side of it when you understand that, well, after a day off in Nantahala, there's this massive climb out of
Nantahala. There really is. Oh man, that's painful. But you got ups, you got downs, and some of the downs after a while are worse than the ups. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's just part of the whole thing, isn't it? You're going to get that.
Yeah, I think part of my whole theme is being prepared for the difficulty will allow my mental state to be adjusted. And I think every time I can adjust, improve my mental state, I'm going to increase the likelihood of getting to Katahdin.
Yeah. So what are your goals on the trail going to be? See all the views, smell the roses, make friends, experience solitude, or just all of those things?
Well, number one goal is to finish. It's like
yes.
we've talked a little bit about my running in the last decade. I've run a number of marathons and very slow marathon runner, but I always had two goals every time I lined up to run a marathon. One was to finish, and the other was not to be last. So one was the determination to finish what you start. The other was my ego not wanting to be the last one crawling across the finish line. And
when they're all clearing up, everyone's clearing up to go home. Yeah.
Fortunately, as far as I know, I never was last, but I was certainly the back of the pack.
Oh, funny.
But I really want to finish. But other than that, I think the amount of time that this is going to take offers some fantastic opportunities for all the things you mentioned.
Yeah.
I want to see all the views, but as you already alluded to, if I get to Clingman's Dome and it's one of those cloudy days, foggy days, well, you just got to move on. And you might be disappointed that you miss this iconic view. But my guess is that when you get to Tinker Cliffs, you're going to have a good day. And I assume that some days you're going to catch perfect views at these special places, and other days you're going to be disappointed, and you just have to be prepared. Again, knowing that you're not going to get a perfect view, even when you're at these iconic spots, is a way to manage your own mental state. So I do want to see all the views, and I will take side trails where it's appropriate. But I'm not going to take, a half a mile hike up to Mount Rogers on a rainy, cloudy day, because I don't think there's much of a reward to do that. But
I went through there on a beautiful, beautiful day, and I didn't take the side trail. For me, 2,185.3 miles was the number, and if that was the number, that's what I was going to do. I didn't want to do much more than that, I'll tell you. Now, there's not only the hiking part of your through, there's also the fundraising part, and you've set yourself a really, really lofty goal to raise the largest amount possible for the ATC. Tell everybody who your first donor was and how she came to be involved.
Sure. And I haven't been able to publicize this yet on my website. We're still working on a few software issues, and my site's being redone. So I'm a little behind, but I will run a blog post about this. But I'm excited to tell your listeners that my first donor was Jennifer Farr Davis. And I think Jennifer is known to certainly the AT community. We mentioned her earlier this morning about her setting a speed record in 2011. And she has been, I'm overusing the word iconic, but I think Jennifer is certainly a well-known AT personality now. She
absolutely
hiked the trail a number of times. She runs hiking schools and has given them back a lot to the hiking community. And one of the ways she's done that is she serves on the board of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So I was able to meet Jennifer at a gathering of the ATC and hikers up in Maine, and the ATC people hooked us up and wanted Jennifer to know what my plans were and what my fundraising goals were. And amazingly, she said, in 2 days I'm leaving to hike the Mountains to Sea Trail, which you may know is the trail from the North Carolina mountains to the North Carolina beach. Yeah. And I think she just finished that. But right before she left, she wrote a very nice check and handed it to me. And we had a photo op, and all that story will be repeated on my website in the next few weeks.
How nice is that? Oh, that's really
it's unbelievable. She's such a great person, and she's quite an inspiration.
Yeah, she's a great ambassador for the trail. And actually, one of the guys I hiked with in 2014 works for her or for her group, leading hikes, and a guy called Karate Kid, Francisco Miller.
Really?
He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, really is. Now, what are the ATC doing to support your project then?
Kind of doing whatever, within reason, whatever I ask them to do. They've volunteered to come to gatherings. I'm having at least a couple send-off events, and expect them to attend and participate in an evening talking about the trail. They've volunteered to come with me on sort of private one-on-one meetings where I might ask for a particularly large gift, and they've given me some things, a variety of ATC logoed items to give away, and those are all things people can look forward to, both here on the podcast and my website. So they have connected me with their software provider who is helping hook up my website with their systems so that giving will be very easy, and there'll be a good way to get acknowledgement gift and a record for tax deduction and things like that. So
cool.
Hard to say other than, if I ask, they seem to be willing and able to help me.
That's cool.
They don't have the deepest staff. That's one of the reasons we're doing a fundraiser, of course.
Yeah.
There's always needs there, but they're excited about what I'm doing, and they're there when I need to draw on them and help out. So they've been great.
Have you had a chance to revisit your original estimate for what you intended to raise? Because you were looking at about $250,000. Do you think you've got a chance of getting there still?
I do. I think it's sort of, I think we talked about this once. There are days there where I'm frightened to death that what have I gotten myself into? And there are other days where I kind of map out different ways to get to that number. I think, I think I can do this. And you asked a really good question. One of the first times we got together, which was, would there be some undue pressure related to the fundraising efforts that would detract from my height? And I think that's really important for me to keep in mind, because as much as I want to meet this fundraising goal, and I didn't want to let something for me, as epic as doing the trail go by without trying to use it for good. At the same time, there's a personal objective, but I thought it was an opportunity to do something for somebody, and we picked ATC as that someone. But I will say, push comes to shove, I'm going to make sure I experience the hike and not let the fundraising impact my hike.
I agree.
If it
That's
has an
absolutely the right
effect,
way.
It may be the only time in my life I get to do this, and I don't want to. And I can always follow up the fundraising post hike, and there's certainly time after. In fact, if I haven't met the goal, hopefully I've got a whole fall to go out and talk to people, and I'll have hopefully a completed hike that I can use as a presentation, as a vehicle to talk to people about fundraising. So
very cool. Now, one last question before I ask you the listener's question. Now, we all learned last week from your law partner Gary of the tremendous support your company's given you, and I must say I was very touched by the things he was saying. He wasn't even talking about me; he was talking about you. So, what did you think when you heard Gary's words? Because I know you listened to the podcast.
I did, and coincidentally, I listened to it yesterday, and on my way to the office, and literally Gary and I were meeting together with a client that morning, and I had a chance before the meeting started to thank him for participating, and not just participating, but if your listeners have heard Gary's interview, it's the most generous and kind thing I can imagine. He was a little effusive in his compliments. It was incredibly humbling and nice, and I kept thinking that there's that underbelly there that you can't seem to get anybody to talk about. But trust me, that's overly kind for Gary to say those things, and there's plenty of things in my life that I'm not the most proud of. But it's awfully nice to have a partner who will say those things.
I think leaving your car running outside an airport was pretty cool, though.
Yeah,
I cracked up
he loves
over
that story, and he he actually didn't get it quite right. It's actually even in some ways better or worse because it wasn't a business trip. It was a family trip. And the reason the car was running outside the terminal was we had young children at the time. And my wife and I kind of ran the children inside, got them settled so we could check in at the counter. And we got everybody checked in the counter. And off we went to the gate instead of walking back out and parking the car. So I'm flying back to the airport, starting, okay, vacation's over, got to get back to life. And I'm sorting through my mind, okay, where did I park the car? And I literally came to this revelation before we landed that I thought I had left the car out in front of the terminal. And I didn't realize it was still running.
That was funny. That really was funny.
Gary's always liked that story.
No, he was very, very nice. Now I want to move on to the listener's question from David Andrew. He says, "Hi, Mighty Blue. I have a question for Bruce. I'm curious if he plans to join in with the trail family and take part in many of the social aspects of the trail, or if he wishes to make his journey a solo expedition of self-discovery. I know people hike the trail for many reasons, but how do social groups factor into his plan?" How about that? That's a good one.
Yeah, no, great question. And I've given it some thought. I guess first and foremost, I tend to be probably more social than solitary. So yeah. I'm looking forward to meeting people and sharing experiences. And while I'm going by myself, I fully expect to meet and catch up with people day one. And throughout the hike, I would expect that I will inevitably, hopefully, make some friends, walk with them for 2 days, or 2 weeks, or 2 months.
Yeah.
I'm going to let all of that sort of happen naturally.
Yeah.
I don't want to force myself into a family.
Yeah.
I'm probably more likely to be someone who would pick up with 2 or 3 friends rather than 10 or 12. And it's hard to generalize from what I've learned, but some of these families probably are interested in maybe a few more 0 days and a little more partying that I might want to participate in. But
yeah. Hiking with a hangover is not recommended. Not at all.
But I'm certainly looking forward to meeting everyone out there and experiencing all the different people that are out there, and being part of a group from time to time. I think would be a lot of fun. But I also do want some solitude. I want some time to reflect on life and where I've been and where I'm going. So in some ways, I think it'll be a mixture of 1 or 2 friends, a group from time to time, as well as time on my own.
Yeah, I think that's one of the wonders of the trail. Things happen, and you just let them happen to you. And as long as you're open to all these things, I'm sure you are, then things will happen around you almost serendipitously, which I love that part of the trail as well. So I'm sure you're going to be looking forward to that. But that's great. It's good catch up, and I will speak with you next week. Okay?
All right. Very good, Steve. Thanks as always.
Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers now. Take care.
There were certain points in that audio that faded a touch, and I hope you're all able to follow it okay. By the way, I know I make a bit of fun of Bruce's meticulous preparation, probably because I was so unprepared when I stood at the top of Springer, but I thought he made a really good point when he talked about getting into the rhythm of the trail. He's read about these places. He's read about what might happen, and his preparation should help him cope better with things as they occur. I thought the link in his mental state on the trail to his preparation was an astute observation. And, in case you're interested, in my opinion, as with Bruce, I see these record setters as truly inspirational. I have absolutely zero desire to do the hike the way they all did it, but I'm even more inspired by them because I know how tough it can be. The thought of averaging about 50 miles a day when I averaged 100 miles a week, and that was only on my better weeks, is just jaw-dropping to me. I'm all about inclusion, and in many ways these record setters prove the point that long-distance trails are open to anybody who wants to hike it in his or her own way. By the way, what do you think about Bruce's summit plan of July the 15th, his birthday? I bet it looks great on paper, but you're not walking on paper. This plan will change, as Bruce freely acknowledges, and we'll certainly be checking in with him to see how he's adjusting his plan as he goes along. Thanks also to David Andrew for his question. David, make sure that you send me your address so that I can forward it on to Trailtopia and they can ship you 2 of their scrumptious meals. Next Monday is Christmas Day. What could be more appropriate than hearing from Bruce's family on this day for families as he prepares to leave them for 5 or 6 months? They are a very tight family. They unfortunately dished absolutely zero dirt, but they had a few observations that peeled back a couple of more layers of our man. Don't forget to head over to Bruce's site, returningtokatahdin.com, to learn more about Bruce and his adventure. And while you're there, also check out Trailtopia's site at the same time. Before I go, I'd like to wish all of you a very, very Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays or however you want to say it. Bruce and I will see you next week.